I felt it the second I stepped out of the car, that tightness in my chest. It always showed up when I had to be around Margaret. My husband's family was already gathered on the patio, string lights glowing like everything was picture perfect. But I wasn't in the mood to pretend. Not tonight. Not with her lurking around. Margaret's never made it a secret that she doesn't like me. Not outright, of course. Her smiles are always too tight, her compliments wrapped in barbed wire. I was trying to shake it off, just keep my head down and play nice. But then I saw her. Across the yard, near the drinks table. She was hovering over the tray like a hawk, and that's when I noticed it. My glass. The one with the gold rim. I'd set it down earlier. Margaret was doing something to it. Something small. Something fast. But I saw it. The way her hand lingered just a second too long. My heart kicked up. I didn't move at first, just watched, pretending not to. Then she looked up and smiled. That sugar-sweet kind of smile that always made me feel like I was being set up. I started walking toward her, pulse in my throat, and right as I reached her, she said, "Ah, there you are, dear. I've been waiting for you. I have something I need to give you." She handed me the tray. I smiled right back, warm, wide, like I had no idea. And without blinking, I switched the glasses. "Let's toast, shall we?" I held the tray steady, keeping my movements slow, deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. Inside, my nerves were dancing, but on the outside, calm as ever. Margaret clinked her glass against mine with that practiced grace she always wore like perfume. She had no idea. And honestly, that made it a little more satisfying. I didn't even need to know what she'd slipped in. Just knowing she thought she was in control was enough. We both took a sip. Well, she did. I let mine hover near my lips, pretending. The taste probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. My mind was already racing, trying to guess what the plan was this time. A little stomach upset? Something to make me dizzy? Margaret liked her sabotage subtle, just enough to humiliate me in front of the cousins and the perfect floral centerpieces. But tonight, I wasn't playing along. As we drifted apart, I kept her in the corner of my eye. She was talking to Aunt Beth now, nodding politely, sipping that glass like it was her fifth mimosa. And I watched. I waited. Because if I was right, if what I thought just happened really happened, then things were about to get interesting. The music shifted to something upbeat, and people started moving closer to the food tables. I smiled, nodded, made small talk with an uncle I barely knew, all while watching Margaret. That confidence she wore like pearls started to slip, just barely. Her smile faded for a second too long. She blinked, touched her forehead, then glanced down at her drink as if it had suddenly turned on her. I turned away before she caught me looking. She'd feel it soon. Whatever she had planned for me was already working its way through her system. I didn't need revenge to be loud. I didn't need yelling or chaos. All I needed was the truth, and a well-timed switch. Let her sit with the discomfort. Let her wonder what went wrong. I found my way back to the edge of the crowd, swirling the untouched drink in my hand, letting the ice clink against the glass. It was funny, really. All that scheming, and she handed me the tray herself, and somewhere, in the buzz of conversation and the clatter of silverware, I caught her voice behind me. "Ah, there you are, dear. I've been waiting for you. I have something I need to give you." I smiled to myself and raised my glass slightly. "Let's toast, shall we?" I didn't hover. That's what she would have done. Lingered, stared, made a scene. But I've learned something about people like Margaret. They don't know what to do when you act unbothered. So I moved through the party like nothing had happened. I laughed at a cousin's joke, complimented the potato salad, even helped someone find an extra fork. But the whole time, I was watching. Just not with my eyes. She was maybe 10 feet away, glass in hand. At first, everything looked normal. She sipped, smiled, nodded. But then came that tiny shift. Her eyes blinked longer than they should have. Her jaw twitched. It wasn't much, but I caught it. A flicker of discomfort, like a secret slipping out through the corner of her mouth. I nearly felt bad. Almost. She dabbed at her neck with a napkin. Twice. Then again. Her posture tightened. Whatever she'd used, it was starting to make its entrance. And I stayed right where I was, swirling my untouched drink, pretending not to notice. That's the thing about these moments. They don't need a spotlight, just the right amount of silence. By the time she reached for another napkin, her smile had turned stiff. Her eyes darted toward the bathroom once, then again. I watched her chest rise a little too fast. She was sweating, not the graceful kind you can pat away with powder, the kind that beads at your temples and betrays you. And still, she tried to play hostess, nodding at guests, murmuring pleasantries, her grip on the glass tightening like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I took a small bite of a cracker and nodded along to a conversation I wasn't even in. People were starting to notice. Not what she'd done, of course, but how she looked. Uneasy, distracted. Margaret, the queen of poise, looked like someone who had made a very unfortunate decision. I almost wished I could pull her aside and whisper, "Was it worth it?" But no, that would have ruined it. This moment belonged to her. Then, right on cue, it happened. A sharp inhale, one hand on her stomach. Her face lost all its color. She looked around, for an exit, for help, I don't know, and then she bolted. Straight through the crowd, past the string lights, down the hall. I didn't follow, I just stood there, drink still in hand, watching the space she left behind. No one said anything at first. People just paused. You could feel it. A ripple in the atmosphere, like someone had knocked over a centerpiece. A few concerned glances, some awkward chuckles. One of the aunts murmured something about the heat, but even she didn't believe it. Margaret wasn't the type to break composure. If she ran, something was wrong. And now everyone was wondering what. I stayed exactly where I was, smile soft, eyes kind. Not smug, never smug. Just the concerned daughter-in-law, sipping slowly, enjoying the party. The irony was almost too perfect. She'd wanted a scene, just not this one. She'd wanted me to be the one sweating, clutching my stomach, rushing off humiliated while people whispered behind their napkins. Instead, they were whispering about her. It wasn't poison. I'd never go that far. No, it was something far more poetic, something subtle, fast-acting, and embarrassing in just the right measure. Whatever Margaret had slipped into my glass was now working its magic on her. And me? I was still standing, still smiling. The drink wasn't poisoned, just poetic. I waited a few minutes, just enough time for people to stop looking toward the hallway and start filling their plates again. Then I slipped away, quiet, unbothered, like I was just heading to the bathroom myself. The hallway was cooler, dimmer. I could hear the muffled sound of the party behind me, but it felt like a different world back there. And from behind the bathroom door, I heard her. At first, it was just the unmistakable sound of retching. Harsh, guttural, desperate. Then came the voice. Low, frantic. She was whispering. To someone, maybe on the phone, maybe through the door. It was just supposed to give her gas, she hissed. Not me. She was going to embarrass herself in front of everyone. The words hit me like ice. Not because I was shocked. No, I'd already guessed. But hearing it out loud, that was confirmation. It was her plan. It was real. And it was so petty. A laxative? Really? That was the grand scheme? Not some masterstroke of social sabotage. Just bathroom humor dressed up in pearls. It should have made me angry. Maybe years ago it would have. But in that moment, standing there with my heart beating steady and my feet grounded, all I felt was clarity. She'd played her hand. And I didn't have to lift a finger. I leaned gently against the wall, not making a sound, just listening. I could hear her breathing, quick, shallow, panicked. Whoever was with her tried to soothe her, but Margaret wasn't having it. She must have switched them, she spat. I knew she was watching me. That part made me smile. She wasn't wrong. I'd been watching her for years. Only difference now? I finally stopped pretending not to. There was something satisfying in her unraveling. Not in a cruel way. I wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake. It was something deeper, like watching a mask fall off. This whole time, she'd made me out to be the outsider, the naive one, the girl who married up and didn't quite fit. And now here she was, bent over a toilet, confessing to a prank that didn't just fail. It boomeranged straight back at her. I didn't need to stay and hear the rest. Her voice was getting hoarse. The panic was louder now. I stepped away from the door as quietly as I'd come, back into the hallway where the scent of lavender spray tried, and failed, to cover whatever chaos was unfolding inside. And with every step I took away from that bathroom, I felt a little bit lighter. I didn't rush back. I let myself move slowly, taking in the quiet of the hallway, the soft creak of the wooden floor under my heels. I thought about what she said, how she'd planned to humiliate me in front of everyone. I imagined her standing there earlier, smiling sweetly while she doctored my glass, probably giggling to herself about how clever she was. And now? The whispers had already started, but not about me. By the time I re-entered the party, the energy had shifted. People were still chatting, still chewing, but there was a buzz now, a quiet one, cautious. They'd all seen her run. They were already putting it together. The eyes that used to scan me with judgment were starting to drift elsewhere. Toward the bathroom door, toward the empty seat at the family table. I didn't need to say a word. That was the beauty of it. The silence spoke louder than anything I could have shouted. No accusations, no scenes, just a quiet unraveling, one that she'd started with her own two hands. She wanted everyone to laugh at Jennifer. Now they were whispering about Margaret behind napkins. I returned just as someone tapped a spoon against a glass, calling for a few words from the family. The timing couldn't have been better. Margaret was still gone, probably still recovering, and the microphone was being passed around like a game of hot potato. When it landed in my hands, I didn't hesitate. My heart was steady, my voice clear. It wasn't planned, but somehow it felt right. I stepped up, letting the chatter fade. Faces turned toward me, some expectant, some surprised. A few looked uncertain, maybe still trying to figure out what had just happened in the last 30 minutes. I held my glass up, the same one Margaret had so thoughtfully prepared. Still full, still untouched. That part made me smile a little too wide. I just wanted to say thank you, I began, keeping it simple. This evening has been revealing, and honestly, kind of beautiful. A few chuckles, polite smiles. They didn't know what I meant, not fully, not yet. But they were listening now. I could feel the shift, the subtle lean-in that happens when people sense something unsaid hanging in the air. I let the pause hang for a second, just long enough to stir a bit of curiosity. Not too much, just enough to feel the room lean in. Then I lowered my glass a touch and added, sometimes the things meant to bring us down end up revealing the truth instead. It was vague, purposefully, but meaningful enough to hit somewhere deeper. I saw it in their faces, a flicker of recognition, a collective tightening of breath. No one laughed, no one interrupted, they just watched. And in that silence, I let my gaze drift across the tables, catching glimpses of relatives whispering behind their wine glasses. They were piecing it together now, not all of it, but enough to know that something had happened, something that Margaret, for once, wouldn't be able to spin. Then, right on cue, she reappeared, pale, disheveled, hair out of place in a way I'd never seen before. She stepped back into the party like a shadow of herself, and as the spotlight shifted, not literally, but socially, right onto her, I raised my glass once more and smiled. To unexpected honesty. The room erupted into soft applause, not thunderous, just enough to feel polite, supportive. But I wasn't listening to the claps. I was watching Margaret. Her eyes locked with mine for a split second, just long enough for her to understand what I'd done, or more accurately, what she'd done to herself. She opened her mouth like she might say something, maybe to defend or deflect, but no words came. She just stood there, clutching her purse like it might anchor her to the floor. I stepped down and returned to my seat, weaving through the crowd of relatives who suddenly looked at me with a little more curiosity, and maybe something like respect. The tension that had hovered over every interaction with Margaret for years had shifted. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was the woman who'd just delivered a toast no one quite expected, and everyone would remember. There were no fireworks, no scenes, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth didn't need a microphone to echo. Margaret sat down a few minutes later, barely touching her food. And me? I let the ice clink in my glass and took my first sip. No accusations, no drama. Just the kind of revenge that tastes better with ice. The party faded into memory like most do. Leftovers packed up, chairs folded, laughter trailing off into the night. But something lingered this time. Not just the scent of roses and red wine, but the echo of what hadn't been said out loud. The next day, the whispers had already started. A cousin texted me, "What was that last night?" Someone else liked 3 of my photos in a row. People reaching out in that quiet, curious way when they know something's up, but don't dare ask directly. Margaret, for her part, went silent. Not even a passive-aggressive message. Nothing. Which told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was unraveling. That tight grip she always kept on her reputation, on the family's narrative, had slipped. And now people were wondering. About her, not about me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. There was power in silence. In not defending yourself when others expected you to. In letting the truth rise without a single push. Margaret had planned a moment that would haunt me, and instead, she created one that would follow her. A few days later, I got the call. Margaret's voice was softer than usual. Not warm, just careful. She said she wanted to clear the air. I said sure, knowing full well she didn't want to clear anything. What she wanted was control. Damage control. She started off with something that sounded like an apology, though it never quite reached the finish line. "I think things got a little misunderstood," she said, as if I'd imagined her dosing my drink and plotting a public humiliation. I let her talk. I nodded when she paused, and when the silence asked for a response, I gave her one. Calm, even. Just enough weight to carry the message without a raised voice. "It's fine," I said. "I always assume what's offered to me might have strings." I could hear her swallow on the other end. That was the moment she realized the game had changed, not because I was mean, but because I wasn't playing anymore. There's a certain shift people feel when they realize they've lost their audience, that their manipulation no longer works. That's what happened to Margaret in that moment, and she knew it. She filled the next few seconds with awkward laughter, a few mumbled excuses, then hung up before I could say anything else. I didn't think much about the call after that. I didn't need to. The story had already taken on a life of its own, floating from one family chat to another, morphing in tone, but always circling back to one truth. Margaret had slipped. And I hadn't flinched. That, more than anything, was what people noticed. Not the drink, not the bathroom dash, but the quiet way I stood my ground. No theatrics, no retaliation. For years, they'd seen me as the polite one, the peacemaker, the one who stayed quiet when Margaret crossed the line with a smile. But that night changed everything. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't storm out, I simply gave her the stage and let her perform her own undoing. That kind of poise doesn't go unnoticed, especially by a crowd that's spent a lifetime watching the wrong woman speak the loudest. By the time the dust settled, the woman they once called naive had become something else entirely. No longer the outsider, no longer underestimated. I left that party with every guest on my side, and my crown polished.